My name is Julian Aguon. I'm from the island of Guam in the Mariana Island chain in the western Pacific Ocean in a region, the large grouping of which is known as Micronesia. So that's where I'm from. And in some ways, I hope to meander a little bit more than I did yesterday. I'll try to keep my time short because I felt like I did speak a lot yesterday, and some other panelists were not on a previous panel, so I'll try to keep my comments limited. Yesterday I talked a lot about destruction and a lot about the resistance to that destruction. But for the benefit of some folks, perhaps in the audience who wasn't here yesterday, I would like to briefly trace maybe 2 minutes of the aspects of the military buildup going on in Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, because there's sort of many working parts to this militarization of our part of the world. In Guam in 2006, the US decided to transfer thousands of US Marines from Okinawa to Guam, and this transfer was accompanied by many other facets. So we had an injection in a 4 to 6 year window of time of a population that would threaten to swallow up or even eclipse at one point the entire indigenous Chamorro people of Guam. The Chamorro people have been in this landmass, in this area, home for 4,000 years. It's an ancient indigenous matrilineal civilization. And so obviously a demographic change that's volatile and virtually overnight is very portentous for us. So we've had to come up with a lot of ways to resist that. It wasn't just the injection of a military-related population. It was also the accommodation in our one and only harbor of a nuclear aircraft carrier. And to basically accommodate that carrier, the US military said that it would have to dredge or destroy 70 acres of healthy coral reef. There was also a plan for a huge missile defense system, as well as a plan to construct a massive 5-range firing complex on an ancient indigenous burial ground and village, known as Pagan village. So that is the Guam side, and there's other sort of details which I talked about yesterday. But CNMI, I didn't get to mention it. CNMI, again, we're the same people, the indigenous Chamorro people, but we've been politically divided since 1898, which, as you all know, is the United States imperial meridian. In 1898, that is when America decided to strap it on as a European-style colonial power. And so it would have to come up with legal justifications for how a country that never envisioned having colonies would eventually come up with very tricky legal innovations to keep those colonies. So in 1898, there was a breaking apart of Guam from CNMI. But in the CNMI, the US military is actively, right now, at this moment, sharpening their pencils and developing plans to militarize the CNMI as well. There is a plan to use 2/3 of the island of Tinian for live firing and maneuvering ranges as well. Not only Tinian, Pagan Island in the north. Pagan Island, which is virtually, precious little human contact. There's a very few people who live there, and it is a deliciously wild place. Where the culture gets stronger because the lights go out. So this is a really, really incredible, beautiful, arresting place. And they actually plan to take the entire island for more live firing range military buildup. And it's not, and I'll just point out this one detail. Pagan is unique because it's where the US military is trying to basically not only bomb from the sea, because it wants the Navy to get a little piece of the action, but it is also, the Air Force will be dropping bombs, and then the Army, I guess, I don't know, they're sort of out of luck because I guess they're dodging the bombs because they're on the ground. So it's been described as a sort of it's an intimate military training of every single branch of US Armed Forces. So that's why they need the entire island. It's very Diego Garcia, actually. Yeah, it's a gangbang, Kuhan, thank you. And David Vine he presented yesterday. He didn't get enough time to talk about Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, but the Chagosians were moved there by the UK and US. And so this is just a repeat of the same thing. So that's sort of the destruction I talked about yesterday. I also talked about the legal challenges. There's on-the-ground community building as well. So there's lawsuits that have been brought to sort of challenge that. There's lawsuits that have been brought under US federal environmental statutes to challenge that. We've won. There's also a planned lawsuit now. The Center for Biological Diversity has said, well, if they intend to destroy 70 acres of reef, we'll step in, and we're going to also deal with so it's like a case-by-case legal challenge. But in addition to that, on the ground, We Are Guahan is an incredible group of people who've put countless hours of time into deconstructing the sort of more or less lies that the US military has told with regard to how the local community will benefit from all of this destruction. So if you want to check out the website, I also want to plug this because I didn't get to yesterday, weareguahan.com. You can get more information about the militarization plans there. WeAreGuahan, weareguahan.com. Again, Guahan is the indigenous word for Guam. So that is the destruction and a little bit about the resistance, but I don't really want to talk about that for my last 5 minutes. I really, really would like to talk about something I think is much more important, because I didn't have any time to talk about this yesterday, and this is the perfect panel. I believe that we, even the people on this panel, as well as so many people who are attending this incredible conference, we are engaged sort of in exactly the opposite enterprise that the US federal agencies are engaged in. The US State Department, the US Department of Defense, they have a sort of dark art. Their art is to use words to sort of hide all of their intent. So they actually subvert words. Arundhati Roy says they are so good at hollowing out words and emptying of their meaning. And so as a writer, it's especially chilling, because you're always engaged in a project of finding language to precisely reflect to say exactly what you mean. So, I mean, there is a kind of war that's also going on underneath the lawsuits, underneath the community organizing, and it's sort of, there's certain aspects to it that I think are worth pointing out. And I think it's a kind of battle to rescue back our language, to rescue back words, to really sort of complicate and tease at me, and really use language to describe what's going on. For example, for me, when I really am quiet and I'm able to talk to another human being about what's going on in this region, despite all the details and of the sort of gruesomeness of it, that I actually think I'm more preoccupied with questions than with answers. The questions that creep into our bedrooms at night, the questions that crawl under our covers, that sleep with us, that become our lovers, the questions that crawl into our hair like lice. We can't get them out. They keep us up at night. And these are the questions about change, about justice, about waiting, about predation, about how next is empire, what other tool is empire going to fashion to sort of like wreck us with. So we have to sort of come up with the language to resist that. And the last aspect, I think, that I've been giving a lot of thought to before this panel was the language of loss. We are really good at critiquing like what we're against, but what is being lost? What is really at issue? What is being lost? And I think Guam, and when I look at other panelists, indigenous panelists, Papua New Guinea, I mean, these are ancient civilizations that predate capitalism, that predate communism, that predate global predatory capitalism and all of its current incarnations. You know, these islands, the places that we're from, the places we represent, the places we're fighting with these little sort of minutia type of like legal challenges that always feel like flimsy and tiny and insignificant, because what we're really trying to fight is a much deeper ideological, conceptual, spiritual, cultural, moral battle. The battle is so on, but I think we're failing in one respect. I think we haven't articulated with enough precision, we haven't developed a language of loss. We haven't been able to describe what's being lost by all of this hyper-militarization. And that is the sort of ethos, the sort of worldview, the preciously singular worldviews, the definitions of the beautiful, the versions of what it means to we have different visions of well-being. We have a different version of what it means to be human on the planet. And I was like, these are homes, these islands and territories that we represent, that we've been talking about, are homes to an alternative way of seeing life on Earth. And I think it's that sort of deep bio and ethnic diversity that sort of is at issue. And I think that's exactly why the indigenous rights movement is so arresting. And I'd just like to read one last thing, and then I'm done. and then I'm going to give it to Rosa from Papua New Guinea. I think I have enough time to read this 3-paragraph thing. It was the conclusion. I don't usually do this, but I want to read a short excerpt. It's 3 paragraphs, bear with me, from my last book, What We Bury at Night, Disposable Humanity. I think it captures some of what indigenous struggle in the region, in the Pacific, feels like. And it's that feeling, it's the depth and color and vibration of that feeling that may be more valuable in the end than tight analysis. Lelu ruins, Nanmadol, the House of Taga. Across our islands, edifices of our brilliance, our ingenuity, our grace still stand, like Pacific Machu Picchus. 4,000 years later, they remind us of who we once were, who we are, who we can still be. In fact, no better scientific theory to date has explained how our ancients quarried, lifted, transported these stones. The most educated guess they have is that our ancestors had a deep and penetrating metaphysical understanding of the natural world, a relationship with the elements that enabled them to float them through the air. So it is only fitting that part of our restoration and our politics be about magic, about imagination. We do well to start with the obvious. Import culture is eating us, killing us with maladies deadlier than diabetes, lithokobodig, even cancer. It is the threat on our children's imaginations, so imprisoned by imported ideas, versions of history, definitions of the beautiful, that they cannot, for the life of them, even imagine another arrangement, a setup in which fighting and dying in the US Armed Forces is not an acceptable alternative. An 18-year-old Chamorro boy from Saipan, speaking about the sum of money that goes to the next of kin if a loved one dies in active duty service, speaks of death. Quote, "It's okay to go and die. If I'm killed in battle in the military, then at least I can take care of my family. My family will be okay." Like the women of Likiep, of Rongelap, who go out in the middle of the night to bury their grape and stillborn babies, we too are out at night with shovels, burying our boys, our blues, our dreams, our terrors, our tears. The terror that comes when we are quiet, when we realize that we cannot, just cannot negotiate with death. As descendants from some of the greatest storytellers, the gift should have been given to us by virtue of our birth to them. But witnessing what has befallen us, how we have let others trick us into believing that our stories are not worth telling, are not sacred, are not real, has clothed our bones with a cold melancholy. It is up to each of us to find a way to shake that cold off and come back in. Thank you.